Hey everybody, and welcome back to another deep dive. Before we get started today, I just want to remind everyone to hit that like and subscribe button.
Yeah.
And also that little bell icon next to it so you get notified when we release new deep dives like this one.
Very important.
Yeah.
Got to get those notifications.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So today we are diving into something that's extremely important for, well, everybody really. But especially if you're preparing for the UPSC exam.
Yeah, definitely.
We're talking about hazards and disasters. And this is
huge topic.
A huge topic. Yeah. And
really important.
It's specifically focusing on the governance and impact of hazards and disasters.
Absolutely.
Big implications there.
Big implications. This is something that, you might think, oh, okay, I know what a hurricane is.
Right.
I know what an earthquake is.
I know the difference.
But there's a lot more to it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're going to get it. It's way more than just the basics here.
Yeah, we're going to go deeper.
We're going to go deep.
We're going to do a deep dive.
We've got some great source material.
Yeah.
UNICR and some other reports.
Awesome.
And one thing that's really stood out to me is that all this material really emphasizes that a disaster isn't just about like the actual event itself.
It's not just the event itself. It's about
how hazard interacts with
the vulnerability
of that community.
Yeah, and the capacity of the community to respond.
So true. Yeah.
And
that's a great point.
Good example.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Of this is the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami.
Oh, yeah.
You had some coastal communities in some countries that were relatively prepared.
Yeah.
They had early warning systems.
Yeah.
They had evacuation plans.
They had infrastructure.
Disaster-resistant infrastructure.
Okay.
And then you had other communities that were just caught totally off guard.
Totally.
They just didn't have those things in place.
And
so the impact was just vastly different.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But before we go too far down that road, let's
back it up.
Back up a little bit.
Yeah.
And
define some terms.
I
like it.
Right. Because our sources make a very clear distinction.
Oh, really?
Between a hazard and a disaster.
Okay.
And these are terms that people use interchangeably all the time.
Right.
But they actually have...
There's a nuance there.
Different meaning.
Yes.
So...
Tell me more.
A hazard is like the potential for harm.
Oh, okay.
So it's like
a loaded gun.
Yeah, it's like a loaded gun.
Yeah. Okay, I like that analogy.
It's the fault line.
Right.
It's the volcano.
It's the hurricane out there.
Yeah, it's the hurricane brewing.
That hasn't made landfall yet?
Right. It hasn't done any damage yet.
Right, exactly.
But it's there.
It's that potential for that bad thing to happen.
So then the disaster is like...
Pulling the trigger.
Yeah. Right. It's when that potential is realized.
Potential energy.
So that's when the earthquake hits.
Uh-huh.
That's when the volcano erupts.
Right.
When the hurricane makes landfall.
Yeah, and then...
The damage comes.
Yeah, it's not even just the physical damage.
Oh, it's so much more than that.
Right, the sources. Yeah. Talk about the loss of life.
Yeah, of course.
The economic disruption.
The environmental degradation.
It's a whole cascade of consequences.
Yeah.
So we've got the hazard.
The potential.
We got the disaster.
The actual event. Okay.
Then there's this whole other thing.
What's that?
Vulnerability. And I think, it's easy to say, oh, a coastal community is vulnerable to a tsunami.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that actually mean?
Yeah, what does that actually mean?
Like on a practical level.
What does it look like? So vulnerability is...
Yeah, what is it?
It's basically the degree to which a community is susceptible to the negative impacts of a hazard.
Okay.
So think of it like this.
Okay.
A community that has buildings that are not built to code.
Okay.
Or, inadequate health care, limited access to resources.
Okay.
That community is going to be way more vulnerable than a community that has, stricter building codes, great access to health care, and a really strong social safety net.
Right.
Yeah. So it's all about those underlying factors.
And this is where I think it gets really relevant for UPSC aspirants, because there are frameworks like the Social Vulnerability Index.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. That are actually used to assess and quantify a community's vulnerability.
That's so interesting.
To different hazards.
So how do they come up with those numbers?
They consider all sorts of things.
Okay.
Like socioeconomic conditions, demographics, housing stock,
Wow.
Access to services.
So it's like a whole picture of the community.
It's a whole picture.
Wow.
And so understanding these indices can be really useful for figuring out how to address disaster risk.
For sure.
It's all about recognizing
the factors.
The factors that make a community more susceptible to harm.
More vulnerable.
And then kind of on the flip side of that,
the other side of the coin,
we have capacity.
Capacity.
Which is all about the community's ability to withstand and recover from a disaster.
Right, to bounce back.
Yeah.
So true.
So a community that has well-trained first responders, effective communication systems, strong social networks,
important,
and a culture of preparedness.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be much more
resilient.
Resilient, exactly.
For sure.
One of the reports had this really fascinating story.
What was it?
About a community in Japan that had been hit by a tsunami.
Oh, no.
A few years earlier.
Okay.
And then they had implemented this really rigorous disaster preparedness program.
Got it.
They were doing drills regularly.
Wow.
They had community education initiatives.
Nice.
And they even built like a purpose-built evacuation center.
That's dedication.
And then when another tsunami hit,
oh, no,
their losses were so much lower than surrounding communities.
That's amazing. The power of preparation.
Yeah, so that's just an example of how investing in capacity building can really pay off.
Absolutely.
And then again, for those of you prepping for the UPSC, there are metrics like the Disaster Resilience Score, which assess the community's ability to withstand and bounce back from a disaster.
Yeah.
And these scores consider things like infrastructure, governance, community engagement.
Interesting. So we've gone from
hazards to disaster. We've talked about vulnerability.
I want to say passive.
Capacity. But what does it all mean?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Or our listeners.
Right. Like why should I care about this? Yeah, why should you care?
Right.
I think it means that
it means
understanding these concepts can empower you. To be more informed and prepared.
Informed and prepared. I love it.
So, like, do you know what the potential hazards are?
In your area.
In your area.
Right.
Have you taken steps to prepare?
To prepare for something.
Your family and your home?
For disaster.
Totally.
And it's not even just about individual preparedness.
Yeah.
It's also about understanding like the bigger picture.
Oh, the bigger picture.
You know, how governments and organizations working to mitigate risks and build resilience. In communities.
That's a good point. So like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, knowledge. Knowledge is power.
And when it comes to,
in this case,
hazards and disasters, that knowledge.
It really can make a difference.
Yeah, it can.
It can save lives.
Literally.
So
that's a good point to end on.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, this was a good one.
We'll see you next time.
Later.